The running back market is more difficult to evaluate than ever, but there are still 5 running backs that you need to be drafting, starting off with Tony Pollard, and I really don't get it. He's being drafted as the RB29 at a price tag about 99.9 ADP, according to Underdog, and I guess the opposite side of the case is you have Tyjae Spears in this backfield, and people got really excited after Jack Henry left. It seems like Spears could be the feature back. In reality, that was never going to happen, and he is going to be a committee guy for the rest of his career, more than likely. But he's a third-round pick. He's realistically not going to take more than 30 to 35% of the work from a proven producer in Tony Pollard. And if you want to, argue against that, I'll just put the fact that, okay, the Titans gave Pollard 3 years, $21 million. More importantly, $10.49 million guaranteed, which is a decent amount of money in this running back landscape. We aren't seeing running backs get paid almost anything, so that's a pretty solid contract. Now, Pollard's really also being underrated because he had such big expectations last year where he was being drafted in half PPR formats, which is what Underdog is in, as the RB6. So that's what really made his 13.1 point per game season pretty underwhelming. But other than that, it's not like he had a very bad season. He was still solid, and he's playing in essentially the exact same scenario where he was playing next to Ezekiel Elliott. Now he's playing next to another back in Tyjae Spears, and he had 15.6 points per game in 2022. So his best season of his career wasn't actually when he was the main bell cow feature back. He plays a lot better and is a lot more efficient when he has another back to, help him keep his legs fresh, help him kind of stay at 100% and really be more efficient with those touches. Sometimes less is more, and it seems like that is 100% the case with Pollard. Now, also, we want a guy that's going to be, getting the ball at the goal line. Pollard is 6 foot, 215 pounds. He's going to be on the goal line. Spears is a smaller back. He is being used more as the pass catcher. We saw that last year where, okay, Spears did have 70 targets. But let's also keep in mind, Derrick Henry is a significantly worse pass catcher than Tony Pollard. So Tony Pollard has that in his skill set. I wouldn't be surprised if Spears out-targets him just because that's going to be like the primary role he plays. But I think Pollard is going to make it a lot closer. So in this range, kind of just comparing Pollard to some other guys, I would easily take Pollard over Zamir White, RB23, Jalen Warren, RB25, Zach Moss, RB26, and Raheem Mostert, RB28 among guys because Pollard's going to get the work. I think the Titans offense could have a decent amount of upside next year as well. So I like that value a lot. And he is my number 1 drafted running back right now. I'm drafting him everywhere I can. Now, number 2, and these are also from least expensive to most expensive, we are going to have Jonathon Brooks, Underdog ADP 87.1, and the RB22. Now, with Brooks, it's pretty clear. I understand the risk. It's his injury. It's his ACL. But I personally play with the philosophy of if you're not first, you're last, and that kind of has to mean that injuries are so hard to predict in the first place that I'm not going to draft scared. Now, that doesn't mean I want to be stupid and get Brooks in maybe every single league I'm in, but I do want to get a large exposure on him because with the running backs going in this range, he by far and away has the most upside, and he could be a league winner compared to these other guys that probably won't really move the needle for you. Now, I will say, for his ACL injury, there's a pretty good chance that he will be 100% by week 1. Or if he's not 100% by week 1, there's a very good chance that he will be 100% by the midseason, by week 8. And that's what the reports are saying. We have a report coming out of Last Word on Sports who's saying week 1 of the regular season will be roughly 9 months after his original injury, which fits the rough timeline for a typical ACL injury. So that means that he'll probably be back by week 1. And while he might need some time to knock off the rust, in quotes again, he should be back to full strength by midseason at the latest. So it seems like for the second half of the year, which is where you're going to be getting the money in these underdog leagues, which is where it actually matters in your home leagues, that's what I'm drafting for. Now, as a prospect, Brooks is a very good player. I think he's also being undervalued because the narrative is kind of, oh, this running back class is terrible. No, coming out of Texas, he ran for 1,139 yards, caught 25 passes for a great mark of 11.4 yards per reception. That mark is very fancy translatable and just shows that he can be the bell cow back. Now, he's kind of going up against a washed Miles Sanders, a jag, in my opinion, in Chuba Hubbard, so I don't really see any worries about him getting a full bell cow workload there. Maybe early on, sure, you're going to see them spell out Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, but by midseason, I think Brooks is going to be, a true league winner, in my opinion. Now, I don't think Brooks is going to be completely unstartable either. I think he'll probably start out as a low RB2 for most of those first, 8 weeks of the season, and then once we pick up, I believe he will be a high-end RB2 to even a low-end RB1. Now, the next guy on my list is Rhamondre Stevenson, and I've been a big fan of Stevenson in the past. I really like his talent profile. He's going off the board at pick 85 as the RB21, and again, he's a guy that had a pretty underwhelming year at his 2023 RB12 price, but he still had 10.6 points per game in half PPR, which isn't a complete bust of a season, but let's put in the context how bad the Patriots offense was. I mean, if you just watch the game, you'd understand, but the Patriots scored the second fewest points per game, 13.9, and also ran the fifth fewest plays per game, so it's going to make it extremely hard for running backs to put up points when they're not getting to the goal line, when they're not getting on the field a lot, and also if they're not running a lot of plays per game, one that limits the opportunity, but that kind of also just what we know with their record and their plays per game is that means they're also down in a lot of game scripts. So they don't really have time to run the ball. They don't really have time to check it short. They kind of just have to try and push the ball down the field. And with how bad they were, that just led to a bunch of 3-and-outs. So Stevenson's going to get a ton of volume in this offense as well. His only competition is a washed-up Antonio Gibson. Now, last year, Gibson only had 65 carries. So we're not worried about him getting any touches on the ground basically at all. Now, his 59 targets is a little more impressive, but that doesn't even stack up with Stevenson because he was hurt in 2023, so I'm not going to look at his total targets. But let's look at 2022. We were at 88 targets and 69 receptions en route to a 12.6 point per game season. So Stevenson's clearly the better pass catcher overall. He's clearly the better runner. So, I mean, let's just put two and two together. Stevenson's basically going to be used as the almost bell cow back. I know maybe he's not going to get 89% of the touches. We're going to spell Gibson in there for, maybe on third downs, maybe to get some receiving work. But like I said, Gibson's targets are also going to go down, probably because he was playing next to B-Rob, who's a very, very bad pass catcher, and Stevenson's a great pass catcher. So as long as Stevenson's used around the goal line, they are similar in size, 227 and 228 pounds, but we know Gibson has had fumbling issues in the past, and plus he's just the worst back, so it doesn't really make sense for the Patriots to give him a ton of high-value touches in the goal line. I kind of just expect Gibson to be used kind of just to really just give Stevenson a breath on passing plays and maybe get a few carries a game. Like, I'm talking 2 to 3. So I would much rather have Stevenson due to his workload and receiving upside over a guy like David Montgomery, RB18, who I'm not very high on. Aaron Jones, RB19. We're talking about him potentially being in a committee with Ty Chandler. And Najee Harris, RB20, who really just is a fine pick, but I don't think he really has the upside to move the needle for you. Now at 4, we're going to have Rachaad White being drafted at pick 60.7 and RB14. And the only argument you can give against Rachaad White is that he's not very efficient. And I get that. That would be a whole different story if he was being drafted like super high, almost like a Najee Harris that one year where he's being drafted in like the back end of the first round. And everyone was saying, well, he's going to get a ton of volume. And it's like, okay, but he wasn't efficient. So that's not exactly translatable. He was a good pass catcher, but he wasn't a great pass catcher. But again, it's all about the price. I get Rachaad White only had 3.6 yards per carry, but what I actually care about is he had about 70 targets. He had 70 targets and finished as the RB7 last year, 13.9 points per game in half PPR. So after finishing as the RB7, White dropping down to RB14 despite being in basically the same situation. The only differences are Dave Canales is gone and then Team Brown Bucky Irving. Now these moves, I can see, okay, you want to move him down to like RB9, maybe RB10, but RB14 and pick 60 is way too much. Now, losing Dave Canales is tough because I'm a super big fan of Canales. I think he's going to do great things for the Panthers, but the biggest impact that has is on Baker Mayfield. Liam Cohen is the new OC, and he's going to run a very similar style, or that's what the Bucs are saying. That's what these insiders are saying. That's what people that know a lot more about coaching tendencies than I do are saying. So it seems like it's going to be a very similar style. It's not going to take a ton of away from what Rachaad White does. Now, Bucky Irving, I really, really, really don't like as a pass catcher or a prospect. He's really only good as a pass catcher, and he's 5'10", 195 pounds, so he's not going to take away a high percentage of White snaps. He's not going to get work around the goal line. So it kind of seems like he's going to be used as a change of pace back, almost like a depth play, in my opinion. And White is still going to get the majority of pass catching work. He's a better pass catcher than Bucky Irving. I know Irving also had a good amount of targets in college and looked pretty good. But the more I personally looked into his film and his stats, his yards per reception wasn't very good. He didn't really look to do a ton with his targets, and he wasn't really running routes super far down the field. So I think as long as you're having Rachaad White get the high value touches, which I assume, and they're probably going to spell Irving to get the touches between the 20s, which is totally fine by me because that's not going to equal fantasy points. I want Rachaad White to be using the goal line and as the primary pass catcher, and that is going to equal a ton of upside. And I really don't see any way he doesn't return value as the RB14. I think he can really only go up from there, and he's being drafted at his floor. Now, the last guy is Isiah Pacheco, being drafted at pick 47.3, RB11. And I do understand he's the most expensive player on this list, but I think his price is honestly more than fair. He was the RB16 last year, but with his uptick in receiving work, I'm really all in on him. And let's also keep in mind the Chiefs' offense had their worst year since Mahomes came in the NFL in 5 years ago. So the Chiefs finished the year 14th in the NFL with 22 points per game, 10th in plays per game, which obviously compared to the Patriots, like we talked about before, these are predictive stats that kind of just help dictate where the running backs can get an opportunity. It's not bad, but we've seen the Chiefs be top 5 in these marks before, and we've seen them be a top 5, top 3 offense. So I really think these are going to go up, and that's going to help out Pacheco. Now we have the addition of Xavier Worthy and Marquise Brown, and I'm honestly going to look at these as positive additions because Xavier Worthy, for one, is going to be so much better for real life, going to stretch NFL defenses, make them not really be able to press up and respect on the outside. I don't think they're going to run a whole lot of press man, which is also going to help out Pacheco in the running game. Marquise Brown is a little more worrisome because I think he will take a significant amount of targets, and that obviously isn't great for Pacheco, but still, I think it's going to overall, increase their play. Like I talked about, their points per game, which is going to get Pacheco down to the red zone. And he's a big physical back, so he's going to score a lot of his touchdowns in that way as well. So overall, I think it's almost a net positive. I don't think it really has any true big downside if things go insanely wrong. Now, Pacheco is a very talented runner. He ran for 905 yards and 4.6 yards per carry on 205 carries last year. But the issue I had with Pacheco as a rookie was he had 14 targets and he had 170 carries. But in 2023, that number went up all the way to 49 targets and 44 receptions. So that's an exponential growth in that area. So I'm super in on Pacheco with that. He still needs to be more efficient, only 5.5 yards per reception. So that mark I want to see go up. But seeing the improvement in that end is a very, very, says a lot about Pacheco and says a lot about what the Chiefs think of him and how they want to use him as more of a 3-down back versus just that typical NFL grinder, which I kind of thought he was coming out of his rookie season. And something else that kind of speaks to that is they released Jerick McKinnon, who was the only other back getting targets last year. So it seems like they want to totally unleash Pacheco as, that 3-down back because they're probably not going to pay him. They're trying to get their money's worth now. And the only other competition he has is CEH, who was the 3rd in targets. He's not going to eat into his work there. He's just not a very good runner, really not a good player in general. So overall, especially in a wide receiver heavy format, I understand pushing these RBs down. But in the 4th round, that's honestly ridiculous for a back that has mid RB1 upside. I think maybe his downside is a few spots past ADP, but still a good value pick nonetheless. And I think the thing that I really like about Pacheco is after him, I really see it as a big tier break. We have Josh Jacobs, RB12, James Cook, RB13, Joe Mixon, RB15, and Kenneth Walker, RB16. And I all see those guys with a lot more, simply put, I don't think they're nearly as talented as Pacheco. They're not as good of an offense, and they just have a lot more questions than with Pacheco. I think I kind of know what I'm getting, and I think there is a very clear path for him to outperform his ADP compared to these other guys. So he has a good floor ceiling combination, which makes him a guy that I want to draft a lot. I've been getting him a ton of these underdog drafts. But that's going to wrap things up. I hope you guys enjoyed this list. Let me know what you guys are thinking, and obviously this ADP will vary for your home leagues, but I am drafting a ton on underdog right now because that's just the best ADP and best practice for your home league. So if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.